Okay, Lee, you're coming from a cohort
Yes.
where you talked about deep spiritual things. I'm coming from a mahjong tournament where I won 2 out of the 5 games.
I do not know what mahjong is.
It is so difficult to describe that I'm not even going to try to go for it. There's this movie called Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes.
Yeah, they play that.
Okay.
You've seen it?
I have not seen it.
Okay, watch it. They play the game.
Okay.
It is extremely complicated.
Is it like a board game or something?
Yes. And it originated in China a zillion years ago, but like the Jewish community adopted it in America and kind of created a different version. And that's the version that I play.
And you play enough of it to be in a tournament?
Very low key, but yes.
But you won 2 out of the 5 games.
I won 2 out of the 5 games.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Go, girl.
So I'm coming in with a little bit of wind in my sails. How are you coming in?
I'm coming in well. It's a pleasant summer day, hot here in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
But it's good. And I'm getting ready to go on vacation, so I'm pretty excited.
Are you going to have any vacation reads?
I'll take my book that I have been reading. I decided this year I was going to start reading the New Testament again. And then I decided I would put that on pause for the summer while I read my sci-fi book.
Nice.
And so I'm reading Kim Stanley Robinson's, I love Kim Stanley Robinson, sci-fi writer. He's like super smart, and he writes about, climate change, ecology, exploration of the universe. And he's got this great Mars trilogy, and I'm on volume 2 of the Mars trilogy this summer.
Mars meaning the planet?
Yes.
Does it take place in Mars?
Yes, yeah. It's about the human conquest of Mars. Yeah.
Which honestly, not far off.
No, yeah. It's a fascinating read. And I love it because he's like, all of his books are kind of like, we're screwed, we've not taken climate change seriously, and it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
But he, at the same time, is like hopeful and is like, okay, what does it mean when faced with some of the most difficult circumstances that humans what might they do?
Yeah.
And so he's very realistic while also saying, well, okay, what do we do now? So I love it. I love his writing.
Yeah, not giving way to like utter nihilism.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been reading anything interesting?
Yeah. I just finished a book this week called Holy Hurt by Hilary McBride. Have you heard of it?
I know of Hilary McBride, but I do not know of that book.
Nice. Okay, so it just released like in the last couple of months, but she basically explores spiritual and religious trauma. But through like an academic lens, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
I think that the general academic research into spiritual and religious trauma is fairly new. And so she talks about what religious trauma is and how to heal from it. And it was a really good book.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
We could talk about that long.
I know. She had this actually amazing quote. I wrote it down. We stoke in people an inner critic and tell them it's the voice of God.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Isn't that so good? When I read it, I was like, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. We just treat people's shame as like the voice of God instead of saying like shame is something that God can actually help you with and like help heal you from. Yeah.
I know. I was thinking yesterday about a friend of mine who's an artist here in town several months ago told me one day that she has this voice in which she's always in trouble. And I told her, I said, I have that voice.
Same.
It's always like I'm always in trouble, or I'm waiting to hear from somebody about how I've done something wrong.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think so much of that's that sort of inner voice that's stoked inside of us, like she describes there.
And can be compounded through religious circles.
Yeah, sure.
If we don't keep that in check.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good book. Would highly recommend for anyone. If this resonates, with whoever.
Very good.
With anyone who's ever been to church, perhaps. Who knows? All right. Well, let's get started with the show. Well, welcome to the Subtext, where we go beneath the headlines and beyond the obvious. I'm Savannah Locke.
And I'm Lee Seacamp.
Love it. C stands for...
Compton.
Compton, that's it. I remembered that.
Yes.
Lee Compton Camp, have you ever seen the show America's Sweethearts?
America's Sweethearts?
Yes.
No. What is America's Sweethearts?
Okay, so it is this show on Netflix.
Yes.
It came out maybe a month ago, but it's still in the top 10. most watched shows, and it follows the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders from their audition period all the way through the end of the season. And then they have to re-audition every single season. So no one is guaranteed a spot on the squad. It's a very competitive journey. So season 1 premiered last year. It was this huge hit. So then season 2 just came out.
It's top 10 on Netflix.
Top 10 on Netflix. Well, because the Dallas Cowboys are the highest valued sports organization in the world. They're valued at $10 billion. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So the Dallas Cowboys have played this really big role, like starting back in the day, but I think especially since the 80s on, because you know that song Thunder, like dun da 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 from AC/DC.
I do not know that song.
If you watch the show, you would know it. It's from AC/DC, and they do the same dance and have done the same dance since like the 80s.
Yeah.
These cheerleaders. So, anyways, season 1, just introducing.
I mean, I feel a little guilty just talking about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
Why?
Because it would have been so taboo to even look at the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders when I was a boy.
Actually, literally, yes. I can totally.
What do you mean, literally, yes?
I can totally see why, with like hypersexualizing them, like I'm sure that was like a thing in religious cultures and religious circles. This does not focus on that as much, although it does focus on the intense pressure that the women have to like not gain weight or whatever, because basically you get fitted into these costumes on day 1 of the season, and your body cannot change for the rest of the season because it's like custom fitted. So all of that is part of it. But yeah, that is actually really funny, and it is a lot for the male gaze. But that is not what I am here to talk about. Season 2.
That's an interesting phrase. That's you just said that's a lot for the male gaze.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We should move on.
We should move on. We talked about this earlier. We have a million bunny trails that we are going to want to go down, and here I am trying to keep us on track. Season 2 follows the biggest like kind of storyline is the veteran cheerleaders approaching the head of the like HR and legal to try to get pay raises, because essentially they were making like below living wage, but they were practicing or working out or whatever for this organization over 40 hours a week in addition to their other jobs. So there's this scene where a veteran named Amanda goes and addresses the head choreographer and the director of the cheerleaders and basically is like, hey, I haven't been getting placed on like all of these public things that they do, like because they go to like fairs and festivals and shows. And she wasn't getting like asked to do those things. And she was like, does this have something to do with the fact that I've been advocating for like fairer pay with HR and legal? And they sort of denied it. But then there was this fascinating phrase that I want to talk with you about where the choreographer responds to her when she said, you know, I do want our cheerleaders to make more money because all of us are working full-time jobs plus doing this because we love this organization so much, and all of us would quit those jobs just to be part of this organization because we love it. And the head choreographer responded back and said, quote, why would we want people to quit their full-time jobs when that's what's so impressive about y'all? And I just thought that's a fascinating take from an organization that's making billions of dollars, and these cheerleaders play a very big role in like the actual live event part of that. And I was just curious, how does that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, first it just hits me as BS. I mean, you know, it's like, come on, give me a break. And it's when you just said it, what occurred to me is that oftentimes I have seen and or experienced that kind of logic in Christian nonprofit contexts, where it's like, you're doing something special here, so you should be happy to do it for less than market wages. And that works in many nonprofit, Christian or otherwise, nonprofit contexts, because people are driven by a sense of mission. And then that can be something that gets leveraged, I think, oftentimes in unfair ways to the people that have committed themselves to that. So, but even more so when you're talking about a mega corporation that has all that kind of money. So it just seems like it's outrageous.
That's such a good parallel. I literally would have never thought that, but that's so true. And actually a quote that I sent you earlier that Charlotte Jones, who is the vice president of the Cowboys, she said something that is exactly basically what you said, which is that there's a lot of cynicism around pay for the NFL cheerleaders. This is a direct quote, as there should be. They're not paid a lot. She said, but the facts are that they actually don't come here for the money. They come here for something that's bigger than that to them. Speaking to that like mission and the purpose.
Yeah. I mean, but you could speculate that that's true about people who do any kind of work for which they have some sort of sense of passion. You could say that about surely the quarterback that's making, that guy at the Cowboys quarterback. I saw that he had signed a 4-year, $240 million extension. So,
wow.
So, it's like, I mean, he could say that he's being driven by a passion as well, but that's a very different sort of scenario when you think about it in terms of the economic return, obviously.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to be driven by passion, but I guess where I get skeptical is when people who are making money start to tell people who aren't making money that they shouldn't want to make money
because of
the passion and the purpose. Like where Charlotte Jones is like, I couldn't find her specific net worth, but her dad, who like started like or owns the Cowboys. Actually, when we were in Italy a couple of years ago, we went past his yacht, and it's like one of the most expensive yachts in the world. And it's like people who have so much money telling people who don't that they shouldn't want that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what a lot of people are going to say is that, well, look, they have a freedom to walk away from it. They can freely choose whether to sign the contract. They know what they're getting paid. And so they don't have to take the job if they don't want to. But how would you respond to that?
Well, that's what I kind of wanted to ask you, because I've been on a group thread. I need your quote, Lee, to send back to my group thread with my friends. Our friends got in this exact same text. Not an argument. It was just like kind of a debate back and forth of some friends were like, they need to quit and stop complaining. But then my response initially was, why is the criticism towards them versus the $10 billion organization that refuses to pay their employees well? Which leads me to the question, and I actually don't have an answer for this, is it okay to ask for companies and businesses and churches, I guess, now that you brought that in, is it okay to ask and expect for them to pay people well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, based upon what I hear you saying, some of your friends would have said, I mean, there's a place at which, like going back to some of my own experience in having a wage paid by a Christian nonprofit for years, in which I knew that I could be making more money elsewhere. There's a sort of place at which I had to come to where it's like, okay, you're saying, to myself, you're resentful and you're being habitually resentful about this fact. And yet you just got an offer to go teach at a top 50 school and you decided not to take it because you want to stay where you live and you don't want to move across the country. And you think this is a better setting for you and you get to do good work. So there was a sort of place at which I had to say, I don't want to practice resentment about this, even though I know I could make more money otherwise, and I wish they would pay me more money, but they're not. And so there is a place of where I think letting go of our sense of victimization. When we have other options, and a lot of people don't have other options. But if we have other options, then it doesn't do me a whole lot of good to play the victim when I could go do something else if I really need to, or if I really want to. However, if that's as far as the conversation goes, it's not a very interesting conversation because there are all sorts of other things to be thinking about here with regard to what's going on. And I would say one of the most interesting first things that comes to my mind about this is the way commodification is at play.
Okay, you've got to define that. I know sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so commodification just meaning you turn anything into a good that can be traded, bought, and sold on the marketplace.
Yes.
Right? And so what happens in a global capitalist world in which we find ourselves is that everything gets commodified, including, in this case, women's bodies are being commodified.
You're right.
And it's really interesting that it's ironic, I think, that it's a top 10 Netflix program about women who stick with me because about what I'm about to say could be very.
I'm ready for the criticism.
Could be very much critiqued, but let me just get through the end of my sentence, paragraph. Right. So what you have here is a situation in which women's bodies are being hypersexualized.
Yep.
And they are being commodified.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're arguing about whether or not we want to be commodified. Because it's like in an open marketplace in which everything gets commodified, well, of course, the people that control the commodities market are not going to be giving away money. That's the way the whole freaking system is set up, right? And as well, it's not just women's bodies being commodified, it's also men's bodies being commodified in professional sports. And there's been all sorts of fascinating research that's been done. I haven't read any of it. I've just read about it and talked to people who've written in this field, this critical theory stuff that makes these parallels between the way African American men's bodies were treated in the slave markets versus the way men's bodies are treated in NFL sports.
Wow.
And so you have commodification happening all over the place.
Yeah.
And when, the way we talk about humans is to call them human resources. And that is commodification at its heart, right? So commodification is happening everywhere. And so we never do really step back and say, what kind of damage are we doing to ourselves and the way we think about who we are by commodifying everything? And that's one of the big first conversations that I would want to have around all this stuff.
Yeah, that's a hot take, and I love a good hot take. And I do that parallel, and I'm really happy that you paralleled the cheerleaders with the NFL players themselves as well.
Yeah.
Because there is a sexualization piece to the cheerleaders, and they are insanely talented athletes.
Sure.
Like, genuinely, training all the time, super skilled, really good dancers and gymnasts. And there's a part of that actually gets lost because of the sexualization, where it's just dudes being at the games, but they're actually really amazing athletes. And what's required of them is through the roof. And I think for me, that's when I'm processing it. I'm thinking, they deserve to get paid because they're actually really good athletes. And you can't go and do a split on the ground. And even the standard that they're held to do these high kicks, their knees are on their faces when they're kicking. That's so hard to do, as an adult human being versus an 11-year-old. So there's part of that I also wanted to recognize in this conversation. But then the second part in the question...
Just on that, I will say, knowing that we were going to talk about this, I watched at least the preview of this.
Yeah.
And every time they would do the splits, I would say, oh.
No, I feel it in my system.
Oh, I can't believe someone can do that.
Oh, yeah. I would die. Yeah. Literally, I would just tear in half and Todd would have to bury me dead. That would be the end of our lives. But yeah, that part is really important to also recognize, the athleticism along with, yes, the complicated nature, where they're being sexualized in a way that the NFL players are not. Yes, valid. And what's the difference for you when you were talking about the commodity piece? What's the difference for you between that and someone working at Chick-fil-A and getting paid for their work? Do you know what I'm saying? Is that also commodification?
The degree to which we think of humans as resources, then yes.
I love this. Yeah.
But I think that, when we simply think of labor as a line on the profit and loss statement under, salaries or wages paid, and that's all it is. And you're thinking, well, what we always have to do, when the presumption is that what you always want to do is maximize the bottom line, which means you increase revenues or you decrease costs.
Yeah.
And labor is one entry under expenses, and you always want to minimize it so that you can maximize your bottom line. When that's the extent to which we think about human beings, then yes, we are commodifying everybody in the marketplace.
I love that. Yeah. I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
I reserve the right to change my mind by the next episode, but I do think I agree with that. It reminds me of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez just had their wedding in Venice. And when I was watching, the wedding was however many millions of dollars. People are arguing because the budget obviously was not disclosed, but a lot of millions of dollars. And I was thinking about that in light of the Amazon workers' protest in December of last year, where it is alleged that when they were protesting, in the freezing cold temperatures in New York, that they were pummeled with freezing cold water. They were, and this has not been confirmed. It's alleged that the workers who were protesting were basically unleashed with freezing cold water to try to make them stop protesting at the factory, potentially by people from Amazon. Once again, not confirmed, all alleged. But the water thing did happen, but we are not 100% on why it happened. But that being said, I was thinking about these workers protesting for just healthcare. And basic humans, right? Like they just want like regular living wages and healthcare, et cetera. And then thinking about these being the people who made the money so that Jeff Bezos could have his $1 gazillion wedding in Venice. And how, for me, and in my experience and in circles I've run in for most of my life, I have not been around churches or Christians that are willing to be more critical of that reality. And I think that churches have been willing to talk about money in some ways, and like, especially with like the David Platt radical thing that happened, like, in the early or mid 2000s, where it's like, yeah, like give away all of your money, like donate to missions and whatever, where there's like a push for generosity sometimes. But I think that there's not a willingness to step back and criticize our system that enables such a huge wealth gap to continue to carry on. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that, but I also want to go back just a second because I just thought of one huge glaring piece with the America's Sweethearts that we haven't even pointed at yet. And that is that, even the last numbers that I looked at, women for equal work still only make 85 cents on the dollar compared to men.
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
And so there's this gender pay gap that's undeniable. And so, I would certainly speculate that that's another kind of huge piece in this. You look at the pay discrepancy between the athletic men on the field and the athletic women on the field, then that's obviously something going on there.
A zillion percent. Yeah.
But yeah, I think with regard to something like Bezos and workers and not knowing any of that story, and I haven't read any of that kind of stuff. But I mean, obviously in the American experiment, there's been case after case after case going back 100 years, 150 years, where any kind of organized labor is always seen as a great threat. And oftentimes these horrific episodes of violence in reaction to organized labor that try to make some sort of case for it. Give us some sort of fair wage, give us some sort of set of benefits that make it possible for us to live in a decent way when we're doing all this kind of work. So yeah, I mean that's an American thing, and I think you're right that it is certainly much more in recent decades in the Christian church, something that is overlooked and not sufficiently given attention to.
And what is it that is not being given attention to in your mind?
Yeah, well that's there's a lot in that it bucket. But, for example, typically in like moral philosophy, when you talk about something like justice, right? So justice is obviously a slippery idea. So Socrates, Plato, justice is giving what is due to whom it is due. And you're like, well, that doesn't help us any. Right. He gives us a very formal construct. He gives us an idea of fairness. He's basically saying you should be fair.
Yeah.
But he doesn't define what fair entails, right? But in the kind of arguments about what justice should point us towards and the concerns that it should help us cultivate, you have different kinds of justice. So you have, for example, commutative justice. And so commutative justice is this idea that kind of individual to individual, that if you have a contract, then you need to honor what you said you were going to do in the contract, right? So if somebody says, I'll do this work and I expect to be paid this, and there's an agreement on that, then commutative justice requires you to do that.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is that a lot of times everybody wants to run every kind of question around money through commutative justice. So in this case, well, look, the America's Sweethearts, they signed the contract.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? And so per commutative justice, they're being just.
Yep.
Right? But that doesn't raise questions like distributive justice or so-called legal justice or civic justice, in which we're asking questions about what sorts of larger concerns for the common good are at play, what sorts of larger concerns are there for what we ought to be giving to the community, what sorts of systemic things might be at play that we need to also take into account. So the tradition of talking about justice has lots of considerations, but we generally just want to focus on the one.
Yeah.
What'd you agree to? And if you signed it, then I don't want to hear you whine about it.
That is such a helpful framework, because what the questions I've been asking is doing is bringing me outside of communicative justice? Commutative.
Yeah.
What is that word? Communicative would also make sense in my mind, where it's like you've communicated this and agreed to it. But yes, commutative justice.
Yeah.
Like what I think my questions that this show brought up for me was elevating me above that.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, okay, yes. Like, yes, I understand that they signed the contracts, which, by the way, by the end of the season, they did get pay raises for all future squads, which is amazing. So they're going to get paid living wage, which is awesome. Particularly because 2 of the gals who advocated for it won't even see that raise because they're retiring this year, which I thought was really phenomenal.
Yeah.
But for me, the more interesting question and what you're helping me understand in this moment is, yes, that's a contract they signed, but why was that the contract that was given to them?
Right.
Like, why are we okay with that being the contract that was given to them?
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the more interesting question, where it's even, too, like, with this is like really going back in my memory bank. But when California was interrogating some of these like Wells Fargo executives, and they had made like a massive amount of money during a COVID year, but then a lot of people working for Wells Fargo as like tellers weren't making enough money. So they were actually relying on the state of California for like additional help for like food or whatever, et cetera. And one of the politicians in California basically criticized the Wells Fargo exec and was like, why are you blaming them for signing on to this job when they're working full time, rather than pointing that blame on yourself and saying, why are we paying people in such a way that they have to rely on different government assistance in order to just survive with a family?
Right. Yeah.
And I think what you're like helping me see is that what that's doing is it's pushing us beyond that first or the only kind of justice that we really have focused on, and helping us like try to broaden and expand and say like, is there a broader type of justice that has become lopsided that favors certain people and honors others? And how can we start to be more critical of that so that the common good is considered?
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. Let's do a genuine public service
I'm so excited. Okay. I heard that you had drama this week with your public service announcement.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, in the spirit of public service announcements, this is a sort of way to give back to the community and something that is a non-commodified. We're not expecting any sort of economic good back.
This is free.
This is free gift to the community. And I would say, especially for those of you in the Nashville, Middle Tennessee area, it may be true elsewhere, but the skunks are going crazy.
Oh my gosh.
And so we realized that, a plumber came out to work on some plumbing. He said, you've got something under your house.
Oh, no.
And so we ended up setting up kind of ring cameras underneath the house. So we had this tiny little crawl space that I hate. And so I crawled up underneath there, and indeed there was all sorts of animal crap lying around in our crawl space. And so I put up the ring cameras, and my son, about a week or 2 later, he says, look at this video. And we can put the video on the show notes.
You're kidding.
But there comes the skunk right at the ring camera.
Is it just one?
There was only one that we knew of, yeah. And so we call the skunk guy, and it cost us, like a couple of $1,000. And it was going to cost like $3,000 if we bought the guarantee. But they had blocked off everything and all the different ways the skunk could get into the house. I thought, why would you buy a guarantee for $1,000 or $1,500 when I can just call you again to come out and
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen. Everything's blocked off.
Right.
So anyway, we got rid of the skunk, and about 2 weeks later, a week or 2 ago, my son says, bad news. This was from 3 o'clock yesterday morning. And there was another blasted skunk under our house. And I kid you not, she found a little place and dug between the mortar of the blocks in the foundation of our house and made a spot that's about twice the size of a silver dollar and got in there. And then...
Now I'm starting to feel bad for it. I'm kind of on Team Skunk.
No, you're not. You're not going to be on Team Skunk. Because it had already cost me all this money.
Creating this little home, though, is so sad.
No. And so, like, the next day, I found the hole, and then the next day, when there's a big rainstorm coming, our dog, Otis, he starts growling about something. So, what is it, Otis? And so we look out the front window, and there's a mother skunk with 6 baby skunks all behind her, right in the front of our house. And so maybe that was the same skunk. I do not know. But my son, this particular son who started being on Team Skunk, that I was reprimanded, said, I don't want to hear it out of you.
Because
These
of the
things are going to destroy
babies.
our house. And so I went out and hollered at them and, ran them off across the street and found the hole and did the hole. But here's the deal. I kid you not, like 2 or 3 days after I had blocked up that hole, I stopped for a beer in East Nashville, and I had gotten my beer and I was about to sit down and I look out the window. And so this is like 10 miles away from my house, right? And I see a skunk right outside the window. And it's on like a wheelchair ramp that's going up into another building, the building next door.
Okay.
And then I look and I thought, that's not just one skunk. That's more than one skunk. And then it starts moving up the wheelchair ramp towards an open door in the building.
Okay.
And I start counting, and it is 6 full-grown skunks.
It's the same skunk?
And no, it wasn't the same skunk because they're all full-grown.
Oh, they're full-grown. Yeah. Okay, I just thought they grew fast.
But it was 6 of them. And no, they don't grow that fast.
You're being haunted. You're being haunted by these skunks.
And so they go up the wheelchair ramp and go right into the door of the CrossFit gym that is right there. Inside
of the CrossFit building.
Yeah. And so
Pray for CrossFit.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I told the proprietor of the place where I got the beer, I said, dude, those 6 skunks just went into that guy's place. I don't know if he let him know, but anyway.
What
public service announcement, make sure you don't have holes in your house where the animals can get through and they can get through your HVAC. Make sure all of that stuff is blocked off. It is costly not to attend.
Do you wish you had done the guarantee?
In the end, I'm okay because I was able to figure out because we were able to get it blocked off when the skunk was not
As far as
there.
you know.
As far as you
know.
Well, the ring camera, I have taken the ring cameras out because I've been back up under there several times.
Okay.
Because of the dehumidifier that needed attention. Oh. But that's a different story. That's a different public service announcement.
Crawl space issues.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel bad for the skunk with the 6 kids, but all of the other skunks, I'm on your team for sure. Yeah. And why they're haunting you, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know either. But yeah, public service announcement, be careful with the skunks.
Be careful with the skunks. And honestly, maybe just pay for the guarantee if you're going to be haunted. Yeah. I'm happy that it worked out for you, but you never know. You might as well just go the extra mile.
I thought the dude was commodifying me. Come on. And so I didn't pay for the guarantee, but maybe he was being kind to me.
We love a good full circle moment. I love it. A good full circle moment.
So back to the show. Where were we?
Okay, we were talking about the different types of justice and how the questions that we've been asking have been helping us broaden our conversations outside of commutative justice.
Yes.
And why do you think, in your experience, have we been hesitant as Americans, as Christians, as whatever, to maybe be more critical of?
Right.
Critical of this.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I would say probably first, it seems that a lot of folks have what I have taken to calling a free market fundamentalism.
Okay.
In which there's a sort of literalism about any sort of thing that challenges supposedly free market mechanisms is seen as taboo. It's seen like as communist or socialist.
Interesting.
And so anything that's going to question with that, we're immediately suspicious of because, well, you must be a communist. You're a pinko. And so I think that's at least somewhat in the water. And then the ways in which a lot of American Christianity has gotten itself allied with the right means that increasingly we don't ask those kinds of questions, right? So I remember years ago, one famous, I won't say his name, everybody would know his name, but one famous political commentator, pundit, kind of radio guy, once said something like, if your church is talking about justice, you should leave your church because it's not a real church.
Interesting.
So that kind of stuff, that the right and the sort of free market fundamentalism casts suspicion on asking these kinds of questions. That would be the first thing that I would say.
Yeah. Whoa, that's a fascinating quote. If your church is talking about justice, you should leave your church.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating? Which then, that leads us to the second big consideration, and that is that we simply don't know the great tradition in the Jewish and Christian heritage with regard to money.
Yeah.
And with regard to justice, right? So you've got, one of the greatest kind of examples of this is the 8th century BC prophets, and they're railing on the wealthy, and they don't rail on them because they think there's something wrong with wealth. They rail on them because they are not mindful of the needs of the poor, or the ruin of Joseph, to quote Amos, right? And so over and over and over again. And so it's almost like at one, I forget his name, Terence Fredham, I think is his name, Old Testament scholar, had an article some years ago, and the title was something like, Why Justice is a Conservative Issue. And what he meant by that is if you're going to be conservative to the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, then you have to be talking about justice like all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's there all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in the Christian tradition, you go back to 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, people like John Chrysostom, he was the famous preacher in Constantinople, now Istanbul, John the Golden Mouth. And he used to say things like, that your crime is the wealth that you have hoarded that the poor need. And so it wasn't just an issue just of generosity, but a work of justice. Right? And so that's been another kind of interesting distinction, is that especially the Catholics have been good about this, that you have the notion of works of mercy and works of justice. And so somebody like Dorothy Day would say, when I feed people applaud me. I do works of mercy and feed the hungry, they applaud me. But when I ask why people are poor, they tell me to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
All right, so when you start doing works of justice and asking questions about structures and systems and powers, that's when people start getting nervous.
Yeah.
But again, historically, traditionally, the Christian tradition has had loads to say about this, both Protestants and Catholics. But a lot of that has gotten silenced, especially in the conservative field of Protestants over the last 50, 60 years or so.
Yeah. And just Americans in general, we are taught to love money. And I do. As you're speaking here, I'm like, yeah, oh my God, we're like all these terrible people. And I'm like, no, this is you too. Oh, I love this is an alarm for our late stage capitalism. They're like, figure it out. But I even turning it on myself, it's like, I'm very aware of money. I'm very aware of for me and Todd, wanting to set ourselves up for success for the future, and wanting to feel safe and secure in how we view money in that light. But I think sometimes for us, because where I've been landing a lot with this is trying to be more critical in my own life of how much of a hold money has on us, and also recognizing that we need money to live. We need money to live. And when we think through in the next 40 years, we need to set ourselves up in a way where I don't think either of us will ever stop working. But if one of us got in an accident, and we would want to be able to hopefully be able to pay for care and all of that. So thinking through that, and also separating that from the wealth gap that we see. And when people criticize the wealthy, they're not necessarily criticizing the person who also has a beach house on 30A as much as the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos and all these people who literally could lose millions of dollars every day and not even notice, because the gap is so extreme. But I think, did you tell me this quote or someone else did? But anytime an American hears illion, it all feels the same to them. So million, billion, trillion all feels the same. But actually it's huge, vast differences. There's a really cool video on this, on the wealth gap, which basically shows how the wealth that certain people have is actually unfathomable to the human brain.
Yeah.
And that gap is not the same thing as me wanting to retire. And I'm not excusing myself at all, because I still need to be critical of the hold that money has on my life. But how it's not the same thing, but sometimes in conflating it to be the same thing removes us from the responsibility from criticizing it at all.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I do think that a lot of the stuff on the wealth gap is fascinating, and the numbers on that are staggering to consider. And I would say that my own experience, my wife, Laura, and I, when we were younger, we kind of made this commitment that we were just going to be, I would look back on it and say, somewhat naively poor and be happy with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And because I decided not to pursue certain routes where I knew I probably could make a bucket load of money,
Yeah.
and decided to do another route in which I knew that it was going to be, relatively modest. And then by the time we hit our mid-30s, we realized, we don't know if we can sustain
Yeah.
sustain this.
Yeah.
And I was anxious all the time. And so there was this sort of place at which we made a shift where it was like, this isn't working. And we, for good or for ill, we haven't been able to live in a way that feels, especially for me, sane.
Yeah.
With regard to the kinds of financial commitments that we have made.
Yep.
And so there was a turn that took a long time, but there was a turn in which we said, we're going to live in a way that we don't feel under this constant pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that there is a sort of prudence that's important. I'll just speak for myself. I found that a sort of prudence about what was possible in my given context actually helped me live better,
Mm-hmm.
and also has allowed us to be a lot more generous because we've had more to give away.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and I've thought about it a long time, but that doesn't mean that I also don't find myself too often captivated by the love of money.
I know. Doesn't it suck?
Yeah.
And I think that there's like a personal element, which goes back to the justice conversation too. There's a personal element to this where it's like, yeah, like the personal discipline of releasing the love of money from your heart.
Yeah.
There's like a personal practice that for me, I do often, like to be able to say like, God is my provider. Like just even like remembering that, like God gives me breath in that sense, but then also recognizing my responsibility, but then broadening it to say, and the wealth gap is an issue.
Yeah, right.
And like the Dallas Cowboys $10 billion organization not paying the cheerleaders a living wage, that's an issue that we should be able to talk about and think about.
Yeah.
And not only does the Old Testament have something to say about it, but also like all of these theologians and scholars from forever ago have something to say about it. And like the New Testament has stuff to say about it, which we don't really talk about a lot.
No.
Like Jesus railed against a lot of this kind of stuff. And like, I know we talked about like James 5, like very specifically saying like that when the wages of the laborers who you didn't pay, like call out to the Lord and the Lord hears them. That like God cares about how we systemically handle this. And
you don't have to look hard in the Bible to find all sorts of stuff about this. Yeah.
I know.
One of the other big things that helped us when we were young is that we got invited to go live in Nairobi for 6 months.
Nice.
And so this was between seminary and my PhD days. And I'll always remember the week before we left, pulled up in front of my wife's house in Brentwood, which is a very nice, suburb of Nashville, and was listening to NPR. And there was a story at the time, the global population was 6 billion. And they had just come out with a new study that indicated that 2 billion people lived on $2 a day or less. And I remember, and I stopped the car and would listen to the rest of the story before I went in because I thought I want to listen to this. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't have the foggiest idea what it means to live on $2 a day or less. I cannot fathom what that means. Well, within 2 weeks, all of a sudden, we knew what it was.
Yep.
And we made friends with people over those subsequent months who lived on $2 a day or less. And so I think, oftentimes, we need some sort of thing to help us get some sort of perspective. And because of the constant way in which our desire is cultivated. So, the cultivation of desire is an art in global Western capitalist cultures. And there are forces constantly cultivating desire in us.
Yeah.
And without some sort of way to give us some sort of perspective, that can just run amok. And so while those kinds of things can be, mind-blowing, I think it's super helpful for us to get a little bit of perspective and realize there are ways that we can be of great service to the world, and we ought to get busy being of great service to the world with the resources that we've been given and the bounty that we enjoy. And so let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Wow, that was a great closer. Should I end with my public service announcement too, just to end on a high note?
Lay it on us.
Because you really just took us to like a deep spot, and I think someone might want to know about sneakers. That's what my instinct is telling me.
Yes.
Sneakers, tennis shoes is what you might call them as well. So I'm walking the Camino with my mother in 2 months. And
That's
when
very
you
exciting.
walk the Camino, you're walking between like 10 and 20 miles a day, and you cannot wear Air Force Ones. So like, I cannot wear these sneakers. I have to have like for real shoes for this. And so I go to REI. I ask him, what kind do I need for the Camino? They had a person who had done it himself. And this is my PSA. If you ever going to walk the Camino or do any sort of long walks for a long amount of time, you need to buy a shoe size that's one size bigger than your normal shoe.
There you go.
Did you know this?
I did not know this.
Yeah, he said that my feet are going to swell. And he was like, you cannot wear a normal size shoe. You need to get one size bigger. And he said, just trust me. Like, this is what everyone does because your foot is going to swell so much that you're going to need the extra room.
Very interesting. One size bigger.
That's my PSA.
Yeah.
Hoka's, I got size 11.
Excellent.
Giant feet.
Giant
feet. And that's
well, it's been good to be with you today on the Subtext, Savannah.
Same. This was great.
It was great. Good to be with you.
Sadly, I got more convicted than I wanted.